everybody. Welcome to Monday Morning Must Knows. My name is Merlin Rothfeld, and here are 31 things to pay attention to for the upcoming trading week. That's right. I said 31. Normally it's 3 or 4. Get out your pad and paper. We're going to give you a whole bunch of things to pay attention to for this trading week. And I'm kind of cheating when I say 31 because 25 or 26 of those are going to be on earnings calendar alone. Now, we're going to start with earnings because last week earnings was absolutely critical. It focused predominantly on the financial sector, and we looked at names like JP Morgan, Citigroup, Wells Fargo, Morgan Stanley, US Bancorp, PNC Financial. You had BlackRock. All report earnings last week, and all of them beat. Not one of those financial firms missed, which should have been, bam, a big catalyst for this market to shoot to the upside. And what did it do? It just kind of drifted lower and didn't really react too much. This is not a very good sign going forward if all of a sudden financials are doing great and the market shrugs it off because they're probably focusing on the bigger picture. Now, the good news is this week we have a lot of bigger picture economic data coming out. But let's start things off with that earnings calendar because there are some major names reporting, and I want you all to be aware of when they come out. We'll start things off on Monday, which is going to be a little bit light, but there still are a couple big bank names in there. Names like Bank of America, Charles Schwab, and BlackRock, and that's just part of the 327 companies reporting this week. On Tuesday, you've got Johnson & Johnson, Lockheed Martin, Intuitive Surgical, United Airlines, Interactive Broker, and J.B. Hunt. Wednesday brings you the big one. Tesla were reporting earnings, and they're down over 30% in the last 2 weeks alone. So huge slide in Tesla. Maybe that's a little bit of a precursor to their earnings. We'll have to wait and see aftermarket on Wednesday to see what that looks like, but that's going to be a very volatile issue and report. International Business Machines, Procter & Gamble, Lam Research, Abbott Labs, NextAir Energy, and Las Vegas Sands round out your Wednesday earnings calendar. And on Thursday, AT&T, Snapchat, American Airlines, CSX, Philip Morris, and Freeport-McMoRan. Normally Friday is a quiet one. Not this week, folks. You've got Verizon, Goldman Sachs, Schlumberger, and American Express rounding out your earnings calendar. Now, that is obviously a lot of major names. And what makes this one unique is last week was pretty much focusing on financials. This is really across the board. You've got some retailers in there. You have defense stocks. You've got financial firms. You've got pharmaceuticals. You've got all kinds of different companies reporting, which would be a more broad representation of the overall economy. So a very, very important second week of earnings here, which is the broader spectrum of earnings. Now, let's look at a couple other really important pieces of data. I want to focus on manufacturing because, of course, if the economy is going to get back on track, we should see manufacturing start to get back on track. Unfortunately, manufacturing numbers have been declining. Now, the way they're normally read is there's a line at zero. Above zero means economic growth. Below zero means contraction or at least pessimism with regards to manufacturing going forward. Now, this week, we have a couple of announcements which will be important. They're both put out by Federal Reserves. The first one coming out on Monday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time is by the Empire State Manufacturing Index. That means the New York Fed essentially puts out a report where they survey, I think it's about 250 different companies on what their feeling is about their manufacturing business going forward, what's the climate like, and that has been negative for the past couple of months, and that's the expectation is also negative for the current reading on Monday. Thursday brings you the Philly Fed Manufacturing Index, which is expected to be at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and that as well is expected to be a negative number, showing another consecutive month of contraction with expectations in Philadelphia as well as New York. Now, any surprise, anything above zero could really be a nice catalyst for this market. But right now, it seems like any good economic data is just being shrugged off by the markets as this broader pessimism that Jerome Powell has thrown into the mix, starting with Jackson Hole a couple of weeks back, is really starting to precipitate and push more negativity into the market. Now, we're not done. We have another piece that we've been talking about on this program for months now, and that has been inflation. Back when the Fed was saying that inflation was transient and not a problem, we were saying on this program, it is a serious issue and it's going to get worse. And lo and behold, we find ourselves in the midst of a major inflationary environment that the Fed's backpedaling, going, oh no, we might have a problem here. Well, is it just a U.S. phenomenon or is this a global thing? This week, we have a lot of consumer price index data coming out for around the world, which may give us a little bit of insight as to how other countries are faring in this inflationary environment. So let's dive into inflation. Not the U.S. this time. We're talking global inflation. Now, we'll kick things off early in the week with New Zealand. That's right. The New Zealand CPI numbers come out Monday at 5:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, of course, that's when the U.S. equity markets will already be closed. And surprisingly, New Zealand only has 1.7% inflation. I think at this point, they're like, hey, come move to New Zealand. Our prices aren't going up at all. Yeah, well, look, the rest of the world has pretty high inflation, as you'll see here in just a second. So New Zealand comes out Monday at 5:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But then we dive into some bigger countries. You've got the British pound. They were reporting Wednesday at 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Of course, this is before the markets open. They're currently at 9.9%, and the expectations are that they're going to continue to move up, going to 10% inflation. So while the US is falling, it looks like the UK is suffering a little bit more with higher inflation going forward. And finally, rounding out the week on Wednesday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, our neighbors to the north, the Canadians, will be reporting their CPI numbers. Currently, it's 5.7%. Expectations are that's going to be slightly higher than 5.7. Bottom line is inflation is certainly taking its toll not only on the economies but the financial markets of those respective countries. As we battle inflation here in the U.S. by aggressively raising rates, so are these other countries. We've seen Canada, we've seen British pound, we've also seen New Zealand aggressively raise their rates, and now even Europe is trying to raise their rates aggressively to help fight inflation. That, my friends, is your Money Morning Must-Knows. I think we've got 31 different items in there for you to pay attention to for the upcoming trading week. We'll see you next week.